One man versus 5 insurgents, trapped in a house rigged to blow, completely on his own. What David Bellavia did next not only saved his platoon, it made history. This near-death experience contains like 9 separate moments where he easily could have died, and this fight was just an insane, ridiculous scenario that just keeps getting crazier and crazier. So strap in, 'cause it's nuts. US forces launched Operation Phantom Fury, a massive joint assault to retake the city from entrenched insurgents. It would become one of the most important battles of the Iraq War, and by far, the most bloody. Among those deployed was Staff Sergeant David Bellavia of the Army's 2nd Battalion, 2nd Infantry Regiment. On his 29th birthday, Bellavia and his platoon were tasked with clearing a block of fortified houses suspecting of hiding insurgents and weapons. It was a tall order, considering that urban warfare is ridiculously difficult because you never know who's hiding right behind the next door or who's watching you from a 7th-story window. The sun just set and the troops had already been fighting all day. They had cleared 9 buildings so far, looking for 6 to 8 hold-up insurgents. 9 buildings down, and the 10th would prove deadly. The enemy booby-trapped random houses, and they stayed silent so you could never tell where they are. This was a very tense day. As the squad moved into the first room, all hell broke loose. Two insurgents opened fire mere feet away, just one room over. They were firing from a covered position behind some barricades right underneath some stairs to form a makeshift bunker. Somehow, after a brief exchange of bullets, nobody got killed. As this was happening, there were shots coming at them from behind. They were pinned. As squad leader, Bellavia realized his team was cornered and they couldn't move forward, and going back meant exposing themselves to withering fire. If someone didn't act fast, they'd all be dead. Bellavia reached for his M16 to fire back, but enemy fire actually hit his weapon and made it inoperable, so it would no longer fire. He then grabbed the saw and squeezed down on the trigger. Now, using his gun as cover fire, the men escape outside, and he moves into the room where the insurgents are taking cover behind the barricade. And while they were back there, they were probably crapping themselves and praying for dear life. At this point, he realized he was actually holding a runaway gun. For those of you who don't know what a runaway gun is, a belt-fed machine gun can sometimes malfunction to where the trigger locks up, so even if you let go, it's still dumping rounds. Fuck it, that's what he wanted anyway. So he embraces the moment and unloads every single piece of lead he has into this barricade. Thinking that the threat has been turned into meat paste, he hears the last thing you would ever want to hear. 2 whispering voices from behind the barricade. At this point, he had no choice but to flee the building. He threw a piece of rubble to distract them and made a mad dash for the door. Bullets whizzed by his head, but he managed to somehow make it out in one piece. As he ran out the door, a nearby tank fired rounds into the building. David is safe and sound. However, something just wasn't right. David Bellavia wasn't relieved or happy his team made it out. He was angry. He was mad because he just dumped 200 rounds into a bunker and didn't hit a damn thing. He's actually even on record calling this moment a stupid assault. He wanted to go back in. One of the things he was most proud of during this war was that his team never ever broke contact until that very moment. And that just was not acceptable. There was only one thing to do. Grab as many men that wanted to come and charge back inside. So while the rest of his team was dealing with enemy fire from the rooftop, Bellavia and 2 other men re-entered the building. One of them was a combat journalist, and the other was another member of David's squad. Inside, the air was thick with dust and smoke, and the plumbing system had been destroyed by the tank fire. As a result, the place was covered in sewage. As Bellavia is looking around, he notices something that wasn't there before. There were explosives now completely lining all of the walls and a lot of the ground. The enemy was about to bring down this entire building with everyone in it, and Bellavia's team was right outside and would have been killed by the explosion as well. He's realizing all of this as he's wading through the water. That's when David has another crashing realization. Every single step he took was creating ripples, and because of that, the enemy could easily make his position. As he's coming to the realization of the danger they were all in, he spots an insurgent with an RPG. If that thing goes off, all the other explosive devices are going off as well. So Bellavia turns, fires his weapon, and guns him down. At this point, Bellavia's only team member is now low on ammo and has to leave the building. Just then, Bellavia turns to face the rest of the house, and right in front of him is a pitch-black room that has not been cleared yet. That's enough to send shivers down any man's spine. The whole time he was there, he was fighting right in front of a room that he knew nothing about and didn't know if there was anyone in there. He wants to clear the room before moving upstairs. David collects himself and enters using his night vision. Another equipment failure. His night vision is flashing on and off. With his vision only useful intermittently, he hesitantly determines that there is no one in the room with him. An insurgent bursts through a large dresser in the room, fires, and is making a run for the door. David manages to spray him down. Another firefight breaks out between David and two more combatants who are just outside the dark room. He manages to take him out even though his night vision is only working half of the time. It is absolute chaos. At this point, he doesn't even know how many are in the building or how many he's killed. The only thing he can do now is clear the rest of the building. His troops are waiting outside, worrying, listening, but keeping the outside of the building covered just in case there's trouble there. Suddenly, Bellavia finds himself advancing up the stairs because at some point during the chaos, he had shot an insurgent multiple times in the back who fled to the second level. He makes his way to the top of the staircase and is greeted by the very insurgent he wounded prior. Just as the insurgent opens fire, David slips and hits the ground. The bullet the insurgent fired had landed in the wall right behind where David's head would have been if he hadn't slipped. At this moment, his confidence was shaken, and in his words, when the round was discharged from the enemy combatant's weapon, there was a flash of light that reflected off of the insurgent's face. So for one brief millisecond, David could see that man's expression, and what David saw in his eyes was pain and pure fear. That was enough for David's resolve to come rushing back. The enemy flees to another room upstairs, and David tosses in a grenade after him. After the detonation, David knew he wounded the insurgent once again because he was screaming in pain. However, there was something odd about this explosion. Immediately following it, he heard loud metallic clanging sounds. Something very large and made of metal just hit the ground. David pushes into the room, now full of smoke, and to his terror, he just realized he threw a live grenade into a room full of propane tanks. So, no shooting his way out of this one. Then, the unthinkable happened. The enemy combatant he shot 3 times and grenaded once emerged from the smoke, and Bellavia had no choice but to engage in hand-to-hand combat. While they were fighting, Bellavia noticed that the insurgent was missing a chunk of his arm from the grenade explosion, so whenever it looked like the fight was starting to go south, David would grab hold of the man's wound and squeeze as hard as he could. At this point, the guy had to be close to death, and David's realizing this. The insurgent has already suffered ridiculous injuries. In this moment, David hears yet another thing that would make his heart sink. The insurgent he's fighting calls out to someone on the roof, and they answer in Arabic. As David is looking up at the roof to try to spot the new danger, the man he wrestled to the ground fires a hidden pistol and nearly hits David in the head. Once again, he finds himself with a bullet whizzing past his ear. Now, David has to finish this battle quickly. Keep in mind, there's still propane tanks absolutely everywhere. He tries to beat the man to death with his helmet, and the guy is still not dying. David, quickly reaching exhaustion, pulls out his knife and stabs the insurgent in the neck. And with the last bit of strength he has, he proceeds to give the insurgent CPR chest compressions to push the blood out of his neck quicker so that he can somehow turn around and face the threat on the roof. Exhausted, Bellavia grabs the insurgent's AK-47 and enters onto... To add to the badass nature of everything that just happened, David lights a cigarette. I guess he figures he has some time because the enemy can't actually see Bellavia because of the veil of darkness across the sky and the fact that there is now an absurd amount of smoke absolutely everywhere. Just then, the final insurgent jumps off of the 3rd-story roof. But when he lands, he breaks both of his legs. Just as David prepares to deal with yet another desert rat, he jumped off the balcony roof and his teammates smoked the target, eliminating the last of the insurgent holdouts in this area. The house was cleared. 5 insurgents neutralized, all by one man. Because of his actions that day, he became the first living Iraq War veteran to receive the nation's highest military award, the Medal of Honor. And he left us with one final gift, the absolute hardest quote of all time.
This entire military is one cohesive, dedicated force. And the threats to our nations, they don't sleep. They're watching our every move. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. They may be watching this right now. Our military should not be mistaken for a cable news gabfest show. We don't care what you look like. We don't care who you voted for, who you worship, what you worship, who you love. It doesn't matter if your dad left you millions when he died or if you knew who your father was. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that you would be wise to avoid if you know what's good for you. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. We've seen war. We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.